Good evening. Welcome to tonight's special Facebook Live Q&A, where we are introducing the community to a safe worship guidance developed by various faith-based organizations here in Stanislaus County. I'm Amy Vickery, spokesperson for Stanislaus County.
And I'm Linda Muma with the Stanislaus County Office of Emergency Services. We're here at Stan OES. We were approached by tonight's group representing a number of different denominations in our community. We were asked if they could present their guidances for places of worship in our question and answer format. We agreed so that the group could get that information to you.
You won't see us on screen tonight, but you'll hear our voices as we guide tonight's discussion and help direct your questions to our panelists, who were selected by the Worship Guidance Advisory Group to share this information with our community.
Tonight's panelists include City Ministry Executive Director Marvin Jacobo, as well as New Life Christian Center Executive Pastor Dr. Brett Avery, and Lead Pastor from the Redeemer Church, Dr. Jim Applegate.
Let's start with you, Marvin. Thank you for joining us this evening and for all of your hard work to support our faith community in Stanislaus County. We understand there is now a safe worship guidance document recently published. What is the purpose of this worship guidance, and how did this document come together?
Thanks, Amy. Well, the first thing I do is I want to thank the county, Deb Thrasher, Becky, Meredith, for all the support and help they gave us putting this document together. A few months, well, really about 2 weeks into the virus and the situation of the shelter in place, I began to wonder, let's get ready to reopen. Season was going to pass. Eventually we were going to have to open. So I began to call the county and I asked at the office, who can we talk to about putting a group together to begin to plan for reopening of faith centers and worship centers. And lo and behold, I was directed to Deborah Thrasher, who's been terrific for us. And together we began, I was the one who was tasked to put the group together. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's some questions and some purposes we had. And so that's what I want to answer the question. The first thing we wanted to do was to give the faith community a planning tool to assist them to help apply anticipated guidance when state and local orders are modified. We wanted to give them some guidelines, a framework. The other thing, too, is understanding that social distancing and sanitation practices are currently the best preventative measures for this virus. We wanted, again, to give some, as best we could, some clear guidance to the faith communities about what that might look like after we were opened. The other thing that we wanted to do, and we understood this, that there are large congregations and smaller congregations, and so we wanted to put together a framework that was scalable, that could be applied to small congregations and to small or to larger temples. And we also were very cognizant of the fact and respectful that there were all kinds of different faiths in our community and different ways to worship. And we wanted to make sure that we did the best we could to be respectful of that. We wanted to be sure to an understanding that the rules are changing all the time, or the guidelines are changing. And we wanted to be clear that this is a living document, that things change, that things are going to be adapted and tweaked. And so even in the language, you'll see numerous places, this is a living document, this could be changed, because it was important for us to help people understand this is not just hard and fast today, but there'll be some adjustments. One thing I want to say too is there are over 1,000 different types of congregations, temples, churches in Stanislaus County. So we couldn't just invite it was only a small enough space to invite. So we just started where we started. And over time, I'll explain later, but over time there were just ways that we could bring people together. But I want to say to the community is this is a guideline that was put together by a certain group, but I want to encourage you to go to your faith leader because you trust them, and they will be the ones to best interpret and apply the specific guidelines to your specific situation. And of course, we're all going to be available to try to answer any questions that we can and be as supportive. But I want to encourage all the other faiths or anybody that maybe felt like they weren't in the group, no worries. Please trust your leader, and they will give you some direction. As well as if you've never seen very specifics with the guidelines, you can go to stanemergency.com, go to the bottom of the page where it says Faith Communities, click there, and you will see English and Spanish version of the guidelines. So that was...
I wanted to ask you a follow-up question,
Yeah.
Marvin. Would you consider this to be a legal document, or would you consider this to serve more as guidance for the community?
Thank you. No, this is a guidance, a framework. Somebody even used the word suggestions. to begin to help direct congregations as they begin to prepare to open. At this point, there are no legal documents, but we wanted to be as helpful as we could because we know without a doubt that all these faith leaders, they want to keep their people safe and they want their people to feel safe. And everybody I've talked to over the last month of every kind of different faith been so responsible and so concerned to keep the people that that have been entrusted to them safe. So there have been some wonderful conversations. What does this mean? Yeah, but and what if? In fact, this was one of the reasons some of us were really asked to have this time, because there's so many different ways and so many questions, and you saw that in the list that we could apply these guidelines and framework, that we wanted to give the community an opportunity to ask a specific yeah, buts and what ifs. So that was, yeah.
Thank you, Marvin. You alluded to this just a moment ago, but we understand that there was a diverse group of people from multiple faiths who helped work on this. So who was included in drafting this document, and how was that decision made?
So when I began to talk with the county, first of all, the county didn't have any say in who came. So this was not anything for them. I was tasked to be first responsible to put together a group that, let's just start somewhere. So I did contact the rabbi, I contacted the imam for the Muslim church and other groups together. Could you be available? Might you be interested in participating in this? Could you make the time? Because we have to do a deep dive in the guidelines. And so over a period of time, we came together with a group of people. There were some who called and wanted to be included, and so we included them in. We just did the best we could with the best information that we had at the time. So that's how it really came together. I wish I could tell you that, again, we could include everybody, and we wanted to, and we tried the best we could, but with sincerity, we only had enough space to get some things going and working. So that's how it came together. Oh, can I ask one other add?
Go ahead.
Another thing?
Yeah.
One of the things that was very characteristic of the group was, and it was said over and over again from numerous backgrounds, is that we want to be respectful of others. So there were some that were jumping in and saying, "We'll change that language because it didn't work with that faith or that that denomination or that culture." And so again, I was very proud of the group, of the respect of the diversity, of respecting the diversity in our county. I was just very proud of them. So that's the work we did.
Can I stick with you for just a moment
Sure.
before we move on to our other guests? This guidance, is this for immediate action, or is this something later on down the pipeline for when churches are able to, churches and places of worship are able to reopen?
Yeah, thank you. So at this point, churches are scheduled to open in phase 3, which we're not sure if those weeks or months. But again, knowing the intricacies of every one of the cultures, the churches, the congregations, the temples, we knew that we needed to get ahead of this so that the leaders can begin to prepare their staffs and their congregants and even their facilities because of sanitation. Do they need to buy masks, gloves, whatever that would be. And so this really is not about right now. This is about in weeks or whatever the decision is made, we will be ready to start immediately because the leadership will understand how things need to be applied, as well as probably church will be different when they come back than what they were used to a couple of months ago. And so people need to be ready for that.
Let's go to Brett. Speaking of when churches come back, many in your congregations are hoping to come back to church in the traditional sense, but of course that hasn't been permitted by the state stay-at-home order yet. How have you adapted to continue serving your church congregation at New Life Christian Center?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are very blessed at New Life with a pretty incredible staff, and so our staff, many of them have changed jobs. We've actually gone from a 6-day-a-week live open facility to a completely online church, and our staff has adjusted accordingly. So all of our services are now online. We actually have a addiction recovery program that has also been able to go online. We use Zoom a lot, and if you are familiar with Zoom, which most of us are, it's a lot like the Brady Bunch ending. It's kind of crazy, but it's been an amazing gift to the church. So we've learned how to use Zoom. We do a lot of virtual things. Our small groups are actually meeting virtually as well. We've adjusted our website, and we've started putting resources on there for families to download. Our family minister actually did a phenomenal job and created a whole section for families that is designed around our weekend service. So there's music on there, there's downloadable information, there's sheets for parents to do devotionals with their children. And then we've actually kept one ministry on site open, which is our food pantry. So people from our community, not just our church, but from the community, have been amazingly generous. So if you have dropped off food to our food pantry or any other, or served in some way, thank you. Because we have families that otherwise would not be able to eat. And so what you do in dropping that food off has been an incredible ministry, and it's a way just to encourage people. You know, I can't imagine what that would be like to look at your children and not have the ability to feed them. So if you have donated in some way, thank you for doing that. And it's been an amazing opportunity for us. So we've adjusted significantly. We've learned what it means to preach to a camera, which has been a strange thing for our pastors to learn to do that, because obviously we love to be around people. Like you, we can't wait until church opens again, and as soon as it does, I know our county team is working incredibly hard on that. They're doing a great job with that. So as soon as it does, we're going to be celebrating with you. But there are tremendous opportunities digitally to still love people. So I would encourage you, Facebook is an amazing tool to use. The web, YouTube is an amazing tool to use. There are so many ways that as the church we can still communicate the love and the grace of God to people, and we just have to continue to learn how to use those.
Thank you, Brett. This next question I think also applies to Jim. How have you adapted to continue serving your church congregation at Redeemer Church?
That's a great question. You know, one of the things that I've really appreciated about Stanislaus County and the greater faith sector is that we don't think that the faith lives in the building. It actually lives in the people. And that's been phenomenal, because although buildings have closed, the churches have still been, and the faith sector has still very much been alive throughout. And so I want to say thanks to our faith sector, to everyone who is a part of it and makes it up, that you have responded so well during this season. The call to give help and also get help on the loveourneighbors.org website has been phenomenal. And just the responses across the cities to help financially, like Brett said, with the food banks, but then even more than that in serving and just reaching out to your specific neighborhood and making sure that there's no one in the neighborhood that goes without during this time. So I think the faith sector has done a phenomenal job at responding, and I just want to say thanks to all of the churches and the different synagogues, the Islamic Center, everybody who has responded in those ways. So I want to say thanks for that. It's been great.
I think this is another good question for both of you pastors here tonight. Obviously, a lot of people are hurting in our community. What is your biggest concern for your church and the ministries supported by your churches right now?
Do you want me to go first on that one? Okay. Well, you know, obviously there is a great concern for the mental health, and I think that is something that faith can speak into predominantly. And so no matter what faith you're from, you are probably talking about issues related to fear. You're probably talking about issues that deal with anxiety, and those are great things to have conversations out loud about, and really just having the freedom to have those conversations. So if you can create, as a faith leader, a place where people can have those conversations, like what Brett said over Facebook, or different tools that we can use, that we're so thankful for the technology that is present right now, I think those things are really helpful for our congregations. It is really important for us to lead people proactively instead of reactively during this season, in preparing and trying to figure out how to help people. So even as Marvin said, that this document that was put together, it really doesn't apply to church life right now or to faith sector right now. It applies to what's coming in the future. And so being able to look at this document and say, how can we prepare for what is coming, is phenomenal. And I think as faith leaders, we need to be thinking about what is coming in terms of the mental, the financial instability, the social instability. I mean, I look at people each day and I think there's two categories. One is the fearful, and the other one is the fed up. And there's the whole gamut of people between the fearful, those are just paranoid and afraid to walk back into society. They've been sitting at home for so long and just listening to the media say over and over again fearful things. And then you have the fed up who just don't even believe that this is happening and that this is kind of a whole, it's not real in a sense. And so for us as faith leaders to take all of those spectrums and know how to respond and to lead proactively, I think is really important during this time.
Thank you very much, Jim. I want to actually take this question to Brett as well. What is your biggest concern for faith centers and ministries supported by various congregations right now?
Yeah. I'm going to say everything Jim said. I think he did a great job. So here's what I would tell you. Crisis tends to simplify life, right? In the middle of crisis, we tend to think about the people we love and the things that matter to us. And a concern that I have, because I see it in myself, is this is a very easy time to become self-focused and selfish, right? It's an easy time to think about how is the economy, how is the job loss, how is what is happening with the government impacting me personally. And as a person of faith, I will challenge you like I've been challenged. This is an amazing time to love your neighbor. This is an amazing time to care about the person who lives just down the street from you or the next door over or the person sitting next to you at work. And it's an amazing opportunity for the church to be the church of Jesus Christ in this moment and genuinely to love people like Jesus would love people. And what I find is when I change my focus from myself to others, I begin to see this challenge differently. And there is a tremendous need in our community right now for people, for men and women, doesn't matter if you're a person of faith or not, to love your neighbor, to care about each other, to speak kindly to even the person who's checking you out at Walmart or Target, if you go to a gas station, whatever it is, you can actually speak love and hope into a person's life if you and I can get away from how does it affect me and how can I love the person I'm talking to and connecting to. So that would be my challenge. It was challenged to me and it's changed how I've approached this.
Marvin, let's go to you with the same question. Regarding City Ministry Network, what is your biggest concern right now?
So part of our mission is to know what is happening out in the community, how people are responding in some of our historically hard neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that have been hard. But there's food anxieties, lack of jobs. There's, of course, children, numerous families in a small home. We're all going to be concerned about domestic violence and the reports of child abuse that come out. What I really love about our county is even in the midst of this yucky season, there are groups in our community and our government especially who have brought together diverse groups of different sectors to begin to plan for the future when whatever it is looks like when we come out of this. So whether it's mental health, I was just in a call with Behavioral Health Resource Services with over 30 different agencies preparing for caring for the mental health of families. There's those that are from specific neighborhood groups have come in together to work together to align, to coordinate their services, because again, there's been, we can do better when it comes to healing our divisions. And then of course small businesses with the support that we've gotten from the government and nonprofits. And we've been a part of distributing almost $1 million of small business loans from the county and from the federal government. And we're about to do that as being a part with the county again for nonprofits. So even in the midst of this hard season, what gives me confidence about Stanislaus County is that we have leaders that are already preparing for whatever is going to be coming forward. And that includes faith communities, ethnic communities, neighborhoods. So I'm real proud of our neighborhoods, proud of our government.
Thank you so much, Marvin. You had mentioned just a second ago a little bit about food anxieties. And Brett, you actually were talking a little bit about a food pantry. And so Dorothy Bystrom on our live Facebook feed is asking where that food pantry is.
Hey Dorothy, that's a great question. So I'm going to direct you to loveourneighbors.org website. So the best way for you to find it, I mean, you're welcome to come to New Life. It's 2918 West Tuolumne in Turlock. But the best way for all of our viewers to find that is go to loveourneighbors.org and then click on the COVID-19 portion of that website, and then click on the Get Help, and you will be able to see all of the food banks that are in our county. I think there's about 25 or 30 right now, so whichever one is closest to you. And I would encourage you to call before you go, because food banks have specific hours, so that's going to be your best way to get help.
Thank you. I want to remind the viewers at home that if you're just tuning in right now and you have a question that hasn't been answered yet, make sure you go back to the beginning of the video and watch it again, because your question may have been answered. We'll also be posting this on our YouTube channel later. Let's stick with Brett for a second. Many people are putting pressure on church leaders right now to open early. Have you talked at all with your teams about opening before the state grants that approval? And what are you learning from your congregation on how they're seeing this challenge?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. It's the question of civil disobedience, right? And do we as the church choose to, some would say, obey God or obey the state in this? I will tell you that as a follower of Christ, I've actually done a lot of study on this recently. The difficulty that many of our faith leaders have in looking at this is from a Christian perspective. The Bible teaches us really clearly, Romans 13, that we are to obey the governing authorities that God's put over us, right? But at the same time, it also teaches us that we're to obey God first. So we have a difficult challenge in front of us. I will tell you, we've had long conversations, not just with our staff, but with other pastors. We recognize how important it is for the church to gather. Part of our faith is that God commands us to gather as the church. It's Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together. So what is built in intrinsically into our faith is that our faith is both individual and communal. And what happened with COVID-19 is that the communal portion of faith just stopped. And we've been trying to figure out, what does it look like to follow Jesus and not be able to stand up next to each other? So I will tell you that we're wrestling with that question right now. Our team is committed to working very closely with our county office in helping to get churches back open. I will tell you, this team is working incredibly hard, not just for the faith community, but for the business community, for the mom and pop stores, and for everybody in our county to be able to get back working again and be able to provide for their families. So our church at this time is working very closely with our county. I understand the pressure that pastors are under, and I also recognize that it is a tough thing to talk through. I would encourage you to do this. As a team, really pray through this decision. Seek wisdom with other Christian leaders around this, and do what you really believe God is laying on your heart as a leader to do. Because at the end of the day, as followers of Christ, we need to follow what God lays specifically on our heart. Take your time, pray through this, talk with other Christian leaders, and then do the thing that God's laying on your heart.
Thank you, Brett. Jim, did you want to share your thoughts in terms of talking with teams as well?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. So, there is a sense in which we all want to get back to some sense of normal. I just want to remind us that's gone forever now, and we've got a new sense of normal coming, whatever that's going to be. But one of the things that we've loved during this time is focusing on what we can do and not necessarily focusing on what we can't do. And in this season, what I've seen so many faith sector people talk about is the fact that their reach is actually bigger. And it's been absolutely phenomenal to see, like Brett saying, the different tools that we've been able to use, like Facebook and YouTube and just getting out into the community in ways that we haven't before. And so I would just caution us to, instead of trying to jump back in too quickly to whatever that old normal was and try to get back there, to actually embrace the season that we're in and see if you can take full advantage of it, because there's so many great things going on. And I've seen the imam do some great things through this season. In fact, they're going to be handing out food baskets this week. That's a phenomenal thing. I've seen the rabbi do some amazing things during this time in gathering faith sector leaders together. I've seen churches like Modesto Covenant put a food bank together. Shelter Cove had the drive-in service. Sunrise Christian had a drive-in service. There's just all these great ideas right now. And so I think the important thing to think about is the government is not saying you can't. What they're saying is can you do this a different way? And that little shift really helps us to think differently. And listen, if anybody thinks that the government doesn't want the churches to meet, I would argue tooth and nail against that, because we are sitting with government leaders daily, many of them who are part of the faith sector, who are saying we want nothing more than the faith sector to get back to meeting and being like they used to be, because there's such a dynamic impact in our city. But until then, what other ways can we be a formidable force in our community for good? And so please don't think of it in terms of what we can't do. Think about it in terms of we have tremendous freedom to help and be the church, be the faith sector in our community right now. I remember Marvin used to always tell me, don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can do. And that is a great word in this season. There's so much that we can do.
That was a powerful answer. Thank you. Marvin, did you have something you wanted to contribute to that?
Yeah, just real quick in a real practical sense. So I've talked to numerous pastors and faith leaders as they've called me and asked me questions, and even the possibility of them opening it. And the best I can tell them, because they're the ones who have to make that decision, make sure that they talk to a lawyer to get good legal advice, as well as to talk to their insurance companies, because we're also hearing that unless they get freedom from the county or state to reopen, their insurance company possibly might not cover somebody who gets sick in their church and the person decides to sue. So again, in a real practical sense, they just make sure they get good advice and good wisdom before they decide to make any decision.
This next question is for Brett. Patty is asking on Facebook right now, what do you think the new normal will be when we can all gather together again?
Hey, Patty, if you can tell me what the new normal is, that would be fantastic. So I will tell you, I don't think there's going to be one new normal. I think it's going to be very fluid. I think as guidelines continue to change, as the CDC gets a better grasp on this virus and how it's transmitted and what our options are, as our country begins to develop some of this herd immunity to this, as we get used to a little bit more what does life look like, where I walk into a bank and everybody's wearing masks, that still kind of freaks me out a little bit, I'm just going to be honest with you. When we get a little more aware of that, I think the reality is, like Jim had mentioned earlier, there's not an old normal and a new normal. I think we're just going to have to be, as a country, willing to be flexible and fluid throughout this entire process, because there's not a playbook for COVID-19. You know, it's kind of like when you, and I don't know if you're a parent, but you know when you have your little one and the doctor goes, here you go, and you're thinking, where's my book? Like, where's my book for this little baby? And there's not a book for COVID. So there's not a book for COVID for the church. There's not a book for COVID for the county. There's not a book for COVID for the state. And so we're literally making the best possible decisions for those that we can lead with the information that we have. So I will just tell you, Patty, like it's going to be for our family, it's going to be really fluid. And I think if we live flexibly with each other and live with a lot of grace through this, that's actually going to help us get through it really well.
Thank you, Brett. Let's go back to Marvin really quickly here. Can we talk a little bit about this document, this worship guidance? Will you share with the community really what's included in it, the basics, and how it will change the way our community practices their faith?
Generally speaking, again, as we try to prevent the spread of the virus, there's two things we know for sure. One, social distancing, and then number two, sanitation and keeping things clean. So the way it's going to be different is in the guidelines we've tried to do the best we can explaining what needs to be cleaned, how you're going to manage different, whether it's the foyer, will there be coffee center? Somebody asked about, will our coffee, area be open? Those are things that we've had to say, not in this, we want to suggest to you, not in this season. There will be space between people. People might decide to take masks. We want to encourage senior adults to really consider with real wisdom whether they should even participate in congregations because of all those challenges. So it's impacted bands, it's impacted worship. So those are some of the things that we've really tried to do the best we can with the little intricacies of how faith communities operate. So that was how I answered it. What is sure is that the congregation that you left 2 months ago, it will not be the same when we come back because of the guidelines, especially of social distancing as well as sanitation. And we've already been working with congregations, even the ones with the drive-throughs, the drive-ins, about even doorknobs. I mean, just crazy little things that we just have to be aware of now. So,
since you brought it up, Brenda on Facebook right now is asking, she said she would be really interested in hearing how various faiths and the pastors that are here today will conduct services when they are allowed to reopen. Will you provide masks, gloves, etc.? And will congregations restrict the number of attendees per service, and how will they go about doing that?
Yeah, and I know for sure Jim has been working on his plan. I'm confident Brett has. I can respond to say that there are congregations and faith leaders all over the community that are now beginning to add services so they can minimize the number of people. So where if one place had a congregation of 100 people, but their space was jammed, now they're having 3 where only 30 people could come at the same time. So everybody now is beginning to make those adjustments already.
Thank you, Marvin. Jim, can you weigh in on that as well? What are you doing to keep your church family safe and informed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we really appreciate the county, the city, Marvin, your work from City Ministry Network, helping us get ahead of the game on this one. What I would encourage faith leaders to do is to take this document and read through it and almost use it as a checklist. Because what I can see happening is maybe if the governor says, hey, we're welcome to go back on a Sunday or a Saturday or whenever you meet, and all of a sudden you're like, great, he just flicked the switch and we can go back now. Well, the reality is you can't go back the way you did before. In other words, if you were in a church that had some sort of a kids ministry or Sunday school type, or even small groups that met in homes, well, those things change now. And the governor will probably say something like, you can go back if you can socially distance. Well, I don't know about you. My wife and I have 5 kids, and social distance doesn't exist with kids. And they're all adults now, and they still don't socially distance well, and they're great. But you'll have to think through this in every area of your church, your synagogue, where you attend. And so I think this could be a really good checklist for you. And one thing I want to point out that we haven't talked about is there are people from all over Stanislaus County, from Waterford, from Riverbank, lots of different places that put this document together. So they were thinking specifically of your area when they were putting this together, and thinking specifically about kids, about susceptible groups, older people, those who are sick and struggling. And they were thinking too about those who really want to come back right now, no matter what happens to them. And so that's where I think it is helpful to walk all the way through. How can you stay and have a great online presence even while you're starting to think through how do you clean doorknobs and make sure that you have enough hand sanitizer and make sure that you have a mask that if you're singing together, that might change the way that you sing together as a fellowship. And so what your faith sector leader can do is take this document, maybe even get an advisory group together for your group, and say, let's start thinking about how many different changes need to be put in place before we actually gather again. And so I just want to say thanks to all the people who put this together, because it really is a helpful living document that can help us think through these things.
Thank you, Jim. I wanted to go to Brett. How much of your population are seniors and or at risk? And do you anticipate that it will be tough to reassure people about the safety of returning to church when there is still illness in our community, Turlock specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for our faith community, that percentage is going to be different than another faith community. So I will tell you, in this, we are leaning heavily into what the county and the CDC is sharing on this, of the at-risk population, not just seniors, but also those with immune deficiencies or people going through treatment, like my father's going through cancer treatment right now. So he and my mom have actually been locked in the house other than treatment since the middle of March. And my brother comes up and leaves groceries on the front porch, and then they leave, and then my parents slide it open and sanitize the groceries. So I will just tell you, I would encourage the senior population and those with immune deficiencies, continue to watch online, get on the telephone and talk to people. Don't stay isolated. Thanks to technology, we can text, we can FaceTime with each other, we can use Zoom, we can still stay connected to each other. But this virus does attack our older population with a different level of lethality. And so you just have to be aware of that and be careful. Ultimately, you as the individual have to make the decision as to whether you're going to step out and choose to be a part of your faith community live in person, or if you're going to do it from your chair. But what I will tell you is it's very easy when you're isolated to feel forgotten. And I will tell you that there are people that love you, that there are people that are praying for you, that there are people that are thinking about you. And so please, if you're at home and you're isolated, please don't feel stuck with that, okay? Please know that you're loved, and if you're struggling really seriously and you're going, what do I do now? Everybody's forgotten about me. Reach out to somebody, share what's going on, let somebody love and care for you, because we're designed to live in relationship with each other. We're not designed to be isolated, and this virus has caused us to be isolated. So we need to be active in that. I will tell you, we're going to caution our seniors and those to stay at home and not be a part of our services initially, just because we love them and we want to have them around for years to come. So for us, that's the safest choice.
Thank you, Brett. Let's go to Jim for a moment. Lots of discussion tonight about how things will be different when churches open up again. And you just sort of mentioned this when you talked about your children, but we know it will be understandably difficult after so much time apart to discourage hugs and handshakes, etc. So what is your plan for enforcing social distancing measures? And have you considered increasing church services to space everyone out better in each service? Or what ideas do you have?
Yeah, those are great questions. And they're questions that we're still trying to answer, honestly. And so we're glad that we actually have a little bit of time to think about these things ahead of time. It is going to be tough for especially kids to socially distance. And so, our thought in this is that we are going to continue with our online community, our online services, and try to add things so that as people come back together and still try to stay socially distanced, that we add things online so that people don't feel left behind, that they would feel that they're just as much a part now as if they were actually hanging out together. So I think it's important just to put more thought into every area of what we're doing in the faith sector, not just the gathering in person. There might be some things that you could do to make kids feel special, or to take care of that single mom, or during this season, just to go above and beyond in those areas. We are we are not thinking in terms of multiple services at this point. We are thinking about the fact that we are going to be limited in the capacity of how many people can come into our building. And so we're going to kind of split that between who can come in person and then create that ideal online situation as much as we can. And then we also want to invite people who maybe who haven't seen each other for a long time, but as the governor begins to release and lets more people meet together, maybe we can have 2 or 3 families meet in one person's home to sort of have a watch party online. And so there are lots of other ideas of things that you can do. The building doesn't have to represent the totality of who we are. There's lots of ways that we can express and be in community together. And so I would really encourage us to think through that as faith leaders, that we can go above and beyond just the building. And sure enough, this time has shown that to us.
Marvin, did you want to expand on that as well? Because there are a lot of faith centers in our community that have huge congregations, and then there's others that could fit in a living room. Is this applicable to churches of all sizes and worship styles?
So when we put the guidelines together, all of us together, we were larger congregations and smaller faith groups that were a part of it. So even the language, we did the best we could, wanting to be as inclusive as we could, large and small, buildings, smaller buildings, larger groups, smaller groups, home groups. We tried to do the best we could with that. So we want to do the best we can with the language. But I want to, and also to say 2 things. Number 1 is every faith leader, and I want to encourage, as Jim said, to put a task group together, put a group together and begin to have this conversation about how do these guidelines and this framework work best for our situation. But at the end of the document at the bottom, there are 3 of us, but really you can look at the 15 to 18 names on it and call somebody that you trust or somebody that you know. But there were 3 of us with contact information on it. We can walk you through. We can do the yeah buts and the what ifs for you. And there was one question somebody asked about some things might not work because I'm a smaller congregation. Boy, we get that. So if you're comfortable, this person and others, if you're comfortable, go ahead and call somebody on either the committee list, or there's some lists at the names at the bottom of the document that have said we want to help. We can help answer your questions and try to brainstorm with you how you can work, because our faith communities in our county are diverse and there's numerous, and there's so many yeah buts and what ifs questions, and we want to be as helpful as we can to help you walk through those and do the best we can together. I do want to say that it is you have trusted faith leaders already around you that are going to lead you and do well with it, and they can always call as well and connect with us.
Yeah, Jim, did you want to follow up on that comment that Marvin just made?
Yeah, Marvin said something about smaller churches. The church that I pastor is not a really huge church, and I just want to say thanks to some of the larger churches in our community. Rick Countryman from Big Valley has been very generous with his time towards me during this season. And I know, like he has said, hey, our staff, our tech teams, the technology department is open. And so if you're a smaller church, no matter what faith sector you're a part of, no matter which faith, ask for help, because there are people out there who would really love to help you during this season. And whether that be financially or food-wise or just ideas, there's tons of help out there, as Marvin said.
Thank you, Jim. We'll stick with you for just a moment. We know that worship through singing is one of the most important parts of a church service for many people. However, the CDC reported just this week that 87% of individuals who attended a choir practice in Skagit County, Washington, became ill with COVID-19 after practice, where one symptomatic person attended. This was obviously a scary and unfortunate report to read. Do you think church services with social distancing and without singing would work? Will people be asked to wear masks, or will you eliminate the singing for a while?
Well, I think people would like it a lot if we eliminated my singing. Like, that would probably be pretty helpful. I remember one time I was singing in a church service, and I sing loud because I enjoy it, and the guy in front of me said, "Is your mic still on?" And so I'm sure that people would be glad if we didn't sing, at least in my case. But This is one of those questions where I think it would be really great for you to talk to your individual faith leader and ask them specifically, how are we going to deal with this? Because everybody's building size is different. We've been having the discussion, should we make everyone wear a mask while we're singing? Because obviously your breath goes out during that time. And so we know that singing is a huge part of almost every faith. In fact, I'm not sure there is a faith that doesn't have some sort of rehearsing the story of their faith through the songs, which is really important. So can you do that with masks? Can you do that by facing different directions away from one another? How could you stagger chairs in your building? There's lots of different ways, but I think that your team needs to be really creative and following the guidelines that are set forth by the county, and then finding ways that is actually going to work in your context. And believe me, I think I would not advise you to stop singing. I think you've got to figure out ways to sing, and to proclaim that with your voice is a beautiful thing, but just do it in a safe way.
And with you not present, right?
When with me not present.
This next question is for Brett. How do you plan to modify your singing worship practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to jump back for just a minute, because our tech team that you don't see in here is going to put up a link for you to loveourneighbors.org. And so I had mentioned earlier about a food bank. And so if you are struggling and you're looking for some food sources, go to loveourneighbors.org and then click on the COVID-19 and click on the Get Help tab. And that will work for you. So part of the document that we created actually has some guidance around singing and what happens with singing. And I'm going to murder this word, so I apologize. It aerializes our saliva. So that sounds gross to say on camera. I apologize. But the reality is your spit goes further. That's the nicest way to say that, I guess, is when you talk to somebody, unless you're a preacher, and we can spit pretty far, so that's why no one sits in the front. But your spit just goes further when you sing. So while it sounds incredibly awkward to all of us to go, I'm going to go to my faith center and I'm going to wear a mask and then I'm going to try to sing. Because I don't know if you've tried to wear a mask and have a conversation with somebody. It is really uncomfortable. I mean, let's just be honest. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. But this is going to be part of, I guess, what Patty's question was earlier. What's the new normal, right? So I have to get used to wearing a mask and singing. Singing is part of my faith, is an act of worship. It recognizes who God is and what He's done for me. So if the toughest part of that for me is wearing a mask, then I've got to learn how to do that for a while. And here's the challenging part. The mask is really not for me, right? The mask is for the other people that are around me. And as a Christian, my faith tells me that I need to love and care for the people that are around me and that are my neighbors and coworkers. And it even tells me to love my enemies. So if the scripture tells me to do that, and one of the ways I can do that is wear a mask. I'm a type A personality, so rebellion is pretty natural for me. But if I can submit to the Lord and love somebody by wearing a mask, then that's going to be a part of it. We're trying to figure it out for our worship leaders. We're trying to figure out what that looks like for someone to stand behind a mask or behind a microphone with a mask on and lead someone else in singing. So like you, we're trying to figure all of that out, okay? But hang in there. God will give us wisdom on this and help us to figure it out, and we'll just get used to seeing each other in masks. I don't have to shave that way. It makes it a lot easier.
Strange times for sure. We'll hang out with you for a moment, Brett, because I have a question that I think would be applicable to both of you, pastors here tonight. As some large offices and businesses reopen, they plan to use a self-screening process, like a questionnaire, to ensure that only well people are coming in. Do you plan to practice that sort of thing at your church?
Yeah, so I will tell you, part of this guidance actually has some questions built into it that you could literally copy and paste from the guidance document. You could post them online. You could mail them to the folks that come to your faith center. But they're built into that guidance document. And that's going to be the best way, I think, is to ask whoever comes to your faith center to go ahead and self-check prior to coming. So I have a kidney stone that I'm getting out tomorrow, and I did my pre-op today. And when I walked up to the hospital, the nurse met me and asked me all those crazy COVID questions. You know, have you had a fever? Have you done this? Have you done this? And I said, no, but that would really suck if that actually was going on. So she laughed. But then I walked in, and the nurse pointed a thermometer at my head and shot me in the head with a thermometer, which was another awkward experience in a doctor's office. So we're not going to do that at church. Like, you won't have to go through those steps to come. But we are going to ask you to check, because again, it goes back to, do I love the people that are around me, right? My right to come to church and my right under the Lord to love the people that are around me, I have to do that. So while it's awkward to go through a quick self-check before you walk out the door, it's the best way to love and care about the people that are around you.
Thank you. Jim, did you want to also expand on that as well?
No, I think Brett answered that really, really well. So, yeah, he did a great job.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm going to go to the live Facebook feed for you, Jim. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Clifton was looking for a little bit more clarification about small churches and how to adequately social distance, whether that would be limiting attendance to a handful of people, because Clifton points out that this may not seem practical.
Yeah, that's right. Boy, there's nothing practical about this season, is there? And there's really nothing usual about this season. And so I just think, if you're a small church, one of the benefits of being a small church is that you might be underneath the numbers that the governor requires when we actually get to phase 2 to phase 3 of this post-shelter-in-place setting. So that might be helpful as a small church. You might have great advantages to a larger church, but at the same time, the issue is can you follow those social distance guidelines? And if you can't do it in your building, maybe you'd need to call a larger church and see if you can meet there for a while. Maybe you can share facilities. Maybe you can get creative in the way that you go about meeting. Maybe you can meet in an open air space in somebody's big backyard or in a park somewhere. And sure, we need to figure out what the city and the county guidelines are for those things. But these are times not to say what can't we do, but to be creative in saying what can we do during this season.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to go back to Marvin, speaking on behalf of multiple churches with the City Ministry Network. This is maybe a tough question, but we'll throw it out there. At this point, we know we're only partway into stage 2 of the governor's reopen order, and religious services aren't allowed until stage 3, which could be weeks and weeks. Do you believe this is appropriate given our local transmission rates or not? And if not, what are groups doing to advocate for an earlier reopening?
Yes, I do think it's appropriate. On the other hand, I do want to say that there is growing anxiety and concern and anxiousness about let's get started, let's get open. How come Walmart, or how come there's all these questions? And so there's growing questions. I'm getting them every day from congregations and faith communities around why can we do this? When can we do that? So there is a growing sense that they would like to, quote unquote, get on with it. And I know when I've talked to county officials, they understand and they're doing the best they can. All that to say is, at this point, with the rate, we still need to stay closed. And part of it has been, the communities of color in Stanislaus County, they're higher than they should be. So I just want to encourage all of us to be aware, as Brett said and as Jim has said, not gathering together is not about me, it's about somebody else. Also, too, with the asymptomatic people, there are people that do have the virus that don't show signs. I mean, I was at my mom's the other day for Mother's Day, and I was outside, but we were talking. She says, "Oh, come on in. You don't look sick." Well, Mom, I love you, but I'm not going in the house. So those are just things. So at this point, it's appropriate. Do we like it? No. Do we wish we could move faster? Yes. We do know around the country and even in our county, there's a growing, I don't know how many there are, but hey, we're going to go ahead and just do this and we're going to meet. That's our right. When I've had those conversations with them, of course, I have no legal authority to tell them not to meet. But again, we start asking them the questions. And I just start asking them, you need to be thinking about some of these stuff. I mentioned a lawyer, I mentioned insurance. I mentioned the civil disobedience. Are you willing, is this a mountain you want to fight on, a reason you want to fight on, as well as other questions, just again to help them think through the process of this, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to decide. But I do know that there's a growing, I'll also use the word anxiousness, that they would just love to get together and meet and gather. But this is the season that we're in, and I've said to them, I agree, this is where we are. We don't like it, but here we are. Yeah.
This is probably a question that any one of you could answer, but I want to go back to the guidance, because this document probably was not created overnight. So I wanted to ask you, how long have you been preparing this, and what were those conversations like with the various faith centers in our community?
So we probably started 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe 6, 7 weeks ago. Really, it's been that long. I've been in shelter for 60 days or something, so it's been a while. The tones, though, were incredible. Humble, willing to give each other space, respectful, give and take, protecting of other groups. So example, if Brett was using a word that might not work for the imam, they were back and forth of wanting to respect of each other. And I would say that the county staff that were a part with us were just, I want to say, blessed and pleased with the diversity in the room, as well as the give and take and the respectful tone that was given. So that's the response off the top of my head about how it happened. I'm just really proud of that group that worked together. There wasn't any of the things that maybe some people would think. Was there arguing? Was there headbutting? And just, no, there was none of that. There was a lot of give and take and working to understand how each other's was looking at these documents. And you can see that in the language, because since it is a general language, it has to be applied to numerous backgrounds and numerous groups.
Thank you, Marvin. We'll stay with you for a second. So where would the community find this document online to read it? And where would they find other information about churches that might be broadcasting services online or offering drive-in services? Can you share some resources?
Well, you can go to a couple of different places. Well, you can go to stanemergency.org and just go ahead and scroll all the way down the bottom where it says Faith Communities and click on there, and then that's where you'll find the guideline and the guidelines in the framework, and then you can begin to look at it yourself with your own eyes and your own set of eyes and ears in mind, and begin to apply it for yourself. At the end of the document, well, first of all, at the beginning of the document, there are the groups that were participants. So if there's somebody that you know or somebody that you might trust because they have your background, please give them a call. They will do the best they can to partner with you and work it through with you. At the bottom of the last page of the document, there are 3 of us who've been deliberate to say, yes, I will help you. I will make myself available. And it is the 3 of us. And I think Rabbi Shalom is a part of that as well. So there's 4 of us who have said, we will make time to walk it through with people. So that's where you can go. Brett mentioned earlier, loveourneighbors.org is a place where right at the beginning with the county, we said, here's a group, here's an organization that we can funnel resources, we can all work together through, and they've been amazing, working with a lot of families. Hundreds of families have been taken care of through food, other sources. Another place, if you're a parent who are homeschooling and you're going crazy, loveourschools.org is another place where you can go and get support with with your kids in schools. And there are human beings behind those phones. So if you call, a human being will pick up in English and in Spanish, either one you want. And this way we can support you. When it comes to any other congregations, my best I can tell you is just Google the town that you're in, and just Google whatever brand you think you might want to feel comfortable in. But of course, again, my email is on the document. If you want to email me and begin that conversation, I will do the best I can to be as I will be honest and helpful. So.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and I want to make sure that we get to Brett because Chavez7 on Facebook has asked a couple of times, a couple of questions, that is. Is there a gathering number that any of you have heard about that we may be starting at for each service, looking forward to the future when faith centers can reopen?
Yeah. So Chavez, I get your question. So when we went into the shelter in place, we went from groups of 1,000, I think, to 250 to 50 to 10. I think we're going to come out of shelter in place in a different way. So the document that we've created for you guys as churches and faith centers is really based around two concepts: social distancing and sanitizing. So it's really not based around how many people as a number, like 10 or 25 or 250. That obviously can change because the language that we've started using is as of 6:29 on Thursday evening, this is what we know, right? So it changes all the time. So it could change. But what I would tell you is in your faith center, figure out what your square footage is, and then divide that number by 36, and that will give you the number of people that can sit in the room together roughly. Now we know that families, if it's a single home unit, they can sit close to each other, obviously together, but that'll give you a basic ballpark because everybody's going to have a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot bubble around them, virtual bubble. So divide by 36 the number of square feet that you have in your space, and that will give you probably your most accurate number coming out of here.
Thank you, Brett. Well, we are about out of time for tonight. Did you have any closing thoughts for us before we wrap up,
Yeah,
Marvin?
thank you, Amy. Yes, a couple of different things. We all know at this point we are not allowed and don't have the approval to gather together, and we all know that that's been difficult for us. So the government orders are at this point, meantime, not to open. But some things I do want to say to us is, I want to remind everybody this is a guideline and a framework for the moment that we're in. We can't open, but these are in preparation for that glorious day when we can all gather together. And so I would encourage each of us, every faith community, every faith gathering, to begin the preparation, just like we started 5-6 weeks ago, to begin the steps of opening so that people are safe, and more than that, can feel safe. And each one of us as leaders have to work through for ourselves. I want to encourage you to, I'm not sure where you come from in this, this document, but I want to encourage you, the document was created with integrity and honesty the best we could, with a diverse group the best we could, respecting every background that we could think of when it came to the language. And of course, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we have over thousands of congregations, gatherings in our community, and we just did the best we could. So I'll look at you in the camera and let you know that it was done with the best we could with integrity. And I do want to encourage all of you that the government, I think as Jim mentioned earlier, the county's been incredibly supportive. They want us to gather. They have to follow guidelines as well and rules and regulations. So I want you to know that they've been terrific, and they will continue to be supportive until we can settle with this. At the end of the bottom of the document, there are some names that you can always email or call if you want to begin the process of brainstorming, of walking through the abbots and the what-ifs, because your congregation, even I think as Chavez 7 earlier, you all have unique situations, and so we want to be as supportive as you can. If we can't answer the question, we'll do the best we can to direct you. And again, I want to just to let you know and remind you that our community, Stanislaus County, is an incredibly giving and serving community. I'm getting literally calls every day, a couple of times a week, about how can I give money, who can I give money to, who can I serve? I got one today. And so we're directing them all over. And so if you're one of those people, you need support and you need help, please step in and ask for help, because our county is an amazing place to grow up in and to grow old in. And I've looked forward to having my family grow up here. So we're in this thing together. And we're in this thing together. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We want to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight, for organizing tonight's Facebook Live, and for making yourselves available to answer questions directly from our community.
We also want to thank you at home for tuning in, sending in your questions, and doing your part to stay informed and keep our community healthy.
Thanks again, and we'll see you for our usual regularly scheduled Facebook Live next Wednesday night at 5:30. Good night, everyone.